Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reasonably Effective podcast brought to you by myself, Uncommon Fossil, and 10 Types.
Yep. Hello, everyone.
And today I think we're going to talk Pokemon TCG. We're going to talk about buffs and nerfs to cards. We might have touched on some of this before, but going to take a look at some of some of the better decks, some of the better cards in format, think about how to maybe make things a little more balanced, and also how to take some cards that we think could and should be made better, without going crazy. So anything else you want to say for the concept we're talking about today?
Not really. I guess at the time of recording this, Shroud Fable,
It's out.
it just came out, and then the new set Stellar Crown is a month away, so we're not really going to be talking about that. But there are, I think, a few cards I want to refer to there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of assuming we're kind of taking Twilight Masquerade as kind of, since that just wrapped up a couple days ago at the time of recording. That's the kind of the general context we're going to be talking about.
Yep.
So the first thing I was thinking, let's present a couple cards that we think are fairly balanced, just before we talk about making things better, where it's just to give a sense of perspective, right? Obviously, there's some cards we think are too good. Every card shouldn't be of equal strength in the game. That there's too many cards for that. But like, to me, a fair card is NTV, and I like NTV. It's a fire Pokemon. It's a lot of fun to play with, but 230 HP. You know what it does. Fleet-footed, can draw a card when it's in the active. That ability is honestly not very significant to the value of the Pokemon, but it's a little plus. Then Burning Ronda for fire colorless does 20 plus 20 more for each bench Pokemon you're using your opponent, so you can do 220 max. There is a new stadium to increase that in the future, but I'm not thinking that's going to my NTV deck, but maybe it is. I hadn't thought of that before. So 220, it's an okay number, and if your opponent doesn't help you out by filling up their bench, then you can't even do that, in which case you can't necessarily one-shot a stage 2 Pokemon, but you can get there for sure, and I think it's pretty balanced. The 230 HP.
Wait, what do you mean stage? Do you mean two prizer, or do you mean like stage
2
two
prizer? I mean a 2 prizer, like a basic EX or V is what I meant to say.
Okay.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah, that makes more sense. So, yeah, I think NTV is balanced. I think Raikou V is also balanced. Raikou V has similar. It has the same ability and attack essentially.
Right.
It is lightning, but then it has 1 retreat and it has lower HP. But both those things do matter. 1 retreat obviously better than 3 retreat.
Right.
And then Raikou V's lower HP does matter as well. There are a lot of Pokemon, or at least a number of Pokemon that do like 220 or something, and so then it will matter a decent amount.
Right. Now Raikou V, was that in the Pikarom decks at one point in time? I forget the timing of things.
No,
okay, they didn't overlap. Okay. Yeah, I mean the 30 less HP, big deal. Retreat cost of 1 less, big deal. So which I think are fair trade-offs. Suicune V was, I think, the first of these 3 Pokemon to come out, and that one.
Actually, I'm trying to think. Sorry, if Raikou V wasn't, I'm pretty sure it was not. I'm pretty sure it had rotated by that point. Yeah, okay. I'm pretty sure it had.
So it might have seemed, if they overlapped, it probably saw some play there in a top deck. NTV, I don't know it's ever been in a top deck per se. I mean, it sees some competitive play, and it certainly it sees kind of outside, rogue deck play for sure. And it's a solid deck, I think.
Yeah, Raikou definitely good in Miraidon, and Miraidon,
yes,
EX I think is also pretty balanced. It has so do you think Miraidon EX is balanced? The good one.
The original one, right? The first that came out in Scarlet Violet base set, right? The 220 damage. It's got 220 HP, 220 damage for 3. That I think that, but can't attack again the next turn. You had ways to power it up. You still do have electric generator. You had Flaffy, so you could power it up in 1 turn. You would have to switch in again for a second turn. I think that was reasonable. Its ability was very important, right? Put 2 lightning Pokemons into play. I think it's reasonable. Yeah. It's, if anything, it might be slightly on the good side of balance, but I think it's within that range.
Yeah, I think so too. And then I think there's some other Pokemon. I think Radiant Alakazam is pretty fair. It's kind of like weird to talk about. Radiants are different. That you can only have 1 Radiant Pokemon in your deck, but
right.
So obviously they're better, but I think Radiant Alakazam is pretty balanced.
Yeah, and we're going to come up with a couple of, I think, one or two ratings that we think are overpowered that should be nerfed in the game. So this is a fair about, this is, it doesn't go in every deck. It's got the painful spoons ability. It's not, you can attack with it, not usually, but you move two damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another. So it fits in, it's a good slot in certain decks, but limited, but useful in those decks, which I think makes it fair.
Yeah, and also we're not just to make sure that y'all understand, we're not saying that they should actually nerf these cards by like errataing all of them or something. That would be like a big mess. But I kind of more like, oh, if they had originally been printed this way, that would be better. Or that also in Pokemon TCG Live, they could technically change the numbers. I mean, they probably can't. That probably wouldn't work because Live, isn't the best. Or something like Pokemon
Oh yeah.
TCG Pocket, which I think it's kind of weird. It's in a weird state right now, but I think that might have buffs and nerfs. I don't think that's off the table. I don't know if it will. I'd say right now I'm saying it probably won't, but it's possible.
Right. In Magic the Gathering Arena, the online client, they leave the printed cards as they are, but then they have another format that Alchemy, which they can actually modify the cards. And I think then like Marvel Snap, a digital only app, they do modify the cards in that game, correct?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, obviously we need the connection to the TCG, but yeah, it's more of a case of these things probably should have been designed differently to start. Like, we're not going to talk about things out of format, but I think Mew VMAX was Genesect V was just too strong of a package, and obviously Pokemon spent many sets trying to hard counter Mew EX, trying to undo what they did in a sense.
Yeah, but I think I want to start with the first deck that I think it's a very good deck right now. I think it's pretty good. I was gonna make a top 10 list for the new expansion. Snorlax is
Yeah.
probably gonna be in the top half of that. But Snorlax has its ability Block, which says if it's in the active, your opponent's active can't retreat, and it also has 150 HP and 4 retreat
Hmm.
cost, weakness to fighting. And so it sits in the active, your opponent can't really do anything. And Uncommon Fossil, do you think this deck or this card is too good?
I do. Look, I mean, you and I both will play Snorlax. I've certainly made a number of videos on Snorlax, the block Snorlax decks. I'm going to be glad when it rotates, though. It's not fun to play against for sure, and it's not, and it's also you make this. It's a bit of a. It's not a mindless deck. So don't take that at all. But the number of critical choice decisions you make is limited, and especially for it lends to long games, and you're making fewer hard decisions, I think, over a course of a game. And for a control style deck, I definitely don't like that. So I think, yeah, I think it's too strong. It's too easy of a control card to play. And I think, right, they had a card like this in the past, and did they get rid of it from expanded?
Well, no, it's not. It wasn't like band expanded, but it was
Okay.
it was it was solid. But then, I don't think the deck's that easy to play like right now. Because there are a lot of counters to Snorlax that people are playing as well. But
Yes.
I think like you probably make the same number of decisions with a Snorlax deck as like say a lot of other top decks. And yeah, as you said, the games are longer, so the number of like important actions per turn is lower. But I think
Hmm.
Snorlax is still kind of difficult to play right now in standard. If your opponent like knows what they're doing and you know what you're doing, it can be like a pretty intense game. But also, it's an intense game with like nothing happening. So yeah, I think Snorlax is like. So how would you nerf it?
Right. So the question, and I think you want to also talk about some of the cards that are good in Snorlax, right, as well. And that might be more where the problem lies. But let's see, with Snorlax itself, I certainly the attack's not what the card's about, so we don't need to mess with that. And the retreat cost is 4. That doesn't matter again. That could there be a restriction on the block ability? That obviously would be one way to go. I know it just changes the card so drastically, but like if it only worked against rule box Pokemon or something, maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
I would not hate that if it was only Rulebox because there are a number of Rulebox Pokemon that you can trap that are like definitely definitely Pokemon that can be trapped even with the current Snorlax stuff like Lumineon V,
right.
Sparkability EX, and things like that. But also like they're not most of the Pokemon right now. You're trapping like Barrels and lots of like support engines, maybe Curlia. I don't know about
Right.
Curlia, but different like support engines. It can just do so many different things, and it's like really awkward to deal with. So I feel like reducing it to rule box could be good.
hmm Another way you could go is you could reduce the HP on it. Because right now there's a lot of Pokemon you can trap that can't one shot it, that they can attack, but and also because we have Penny and Format, which just scoops it up, and any attached cards, which aren't really energy, but your hero's cape or whatever like that. So go to hand rather than with Pressaturos or discard. So Penny makes it really good as well. But making the HP lower, kind of like Mimikyu, which I don't know, we might talk about that. That's often the same deck. That's at 70 HP, in which case if it were reduced to 70, non-rule box Pokemon might be able to could one shot it more easily, and that might make it more fair.
Yeah, I feel like it would still be like about as annoying though. Like same Pokemon. I don't know. I could say even like lowering it to like 30 and it would still be okay. Um, because the like most Pokemon are still like the Pokemon that you're trapping are the ones that can't really attack at all. Um,
Yeah,
obviously, a lot of people call it X-Nox stall. Stall is like, like penny looping and things like that. So you'll lose the
right.
stall aspect of Snorlax, but you can still like boss trap stuff. Um, and you can do that pretty like about as well. I mean, you can do that. I mean, exactly as well. Without the stall element. So then I feel like it's still about as good. Like reducing the HP. Obviously, it's worse, but not, I feel like it's not that much worse.
Okay. I mean, part of it is with one of the things with Snorlax is you don't mind giving up prizes. In fact, you want to. One of the things I've learned with Snorlax that was an early mistake is you want to get knocked out early on. Like penny looping, like trying to penny loop before I give up a prize is usually a big mistake. You want to get behind in prizes in large part because counter catcher, right? So the fact that these are in format together maybe is not a good thing, right? Once you're behind, now you can essentially boss up a card with counter catcher and play supporter every turn, and that's just super powerful. Maybe that's too good a combo.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like counter catchers like it's really good in control decks, and it's helped them out like so much. I feel like counter catcher's like really good. It's probably too good, but I personally wouldn't nerf it. Like I feel like it doesn't need to be worse. It's kind of interesting in the way it is. I'd probably like nerf some of the trapping cards because like trapping options are really like kind of like too good. Right now it's pretty easy to trap a Pokemon. Not super easy. Like you do need to have a Pokemon in the active. You don't really want to be using stuff like Spidops because that's like kind of bad. But
hmm
I feel like Counter Catcher is okay. It's really interesting. It's really good. But and you look at it in decks like Charizard EX and Gardevoir EX, very good decks, and they
Yeah.
are able to use Counter Catcher well. But I feel like it doesn't like it makes the game more interesting, which to me is like good.
Yeah, look, I have the solution to Snorlax. So first, I'll say like a card like Mawile that's going to rotate as well. That's got an attack tempting trap for one colorless, and then your opponent's Pokemon defending Pokemon can't retreat. So it's similar, but it's an effective an attack. So it makes it a little harder. Honestly, I think the fact that Snorlax is an ability that you just got to chuck it up there is too easy. I think the solution is it should never been printed. Honestly, that's my thought.
Maybe. Yeah. Um, I guess so. I definitely think that Snorlax is probably the worst design card in Standard because it was like a reprint of a card that already existed. That like, I mean, Snorlax from the Plasma Snorlax, which is the same thing. Essentially, it has, oh no, it has less HP, but it has the same ability, literally. So and that card was like really good, or it was okay. I don't think it was that good in Standard, but it was really good and expanded. Um, and then they printed a lot of cards to help it. I feel like they could have. I feel like nerfing it to like just Roblox would make it like fair, much worse. But I think it would be on like the certainly like almost viable, if not viable, competitively, which I feel like makes it fair.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the card's a little too easy to play for a control deck. And when I click on the limit list, this is the online page for events. It shows you like the top performing decks, and they're all like it's all like first and second placements in very large events, which I think is just too strong a performance for uh, a card that's a little bit to me, it's a little too simple for a control style deck. And of course, there are a ton of cards that go along in the deck that they just keep printing on every set, which I don't like that either. That one kind of leaves me puzzling what they've done.
Yeah, they printed a lot of cards to help it. I think that's like part of the issue. Like cards like accompanying flute directly helps it. Accompanying flute says look
Yeah,
at the top five or reveal the top five cards of your opponent's deck. You may choose any number of basic Pokemon you find them and put those onto their bench. Um, I feel like so I don't like this card because it's random, but also it's like annoying to have to deal with. And so I think accompanying flute probably like shouldn't have been. It definitely helped Snorlax. It doesn't really make sense to print it. Like the only deck you'd play this card in is Snorlax. Realistically, like there are other decks that helps out some. Might see playing Palkia V-Star with the next expansion where that becomes better with Air Zero Underdepths, but also like it's really a Snorlax card, right? And then same thing with
right,
Eric's Invitation. I think Eric's Invitation is like definitely exclusively a Snorlax card. I've never seen it in any other deck or control card, I should say.
right.
Apparently it's seeing play in Iron Hands, like future decks, but I've never seen that.
Right. I mean, there are Pidgeot control decks, which I feel better about those decks because they're a little more complex to navigate, which I think is a good thing for a deck that's trying to just lock down your opponent.
Yeah, but what
I think
about
Snorlax.
Snorlax Pidgeot?
Uh, y- I mean, at least you're making a little more decisions. I don't look. Look, I don't. I'm not a big fan of Snorlax. You know,
Yeah,
I
no,
think
me.
accompanying flute. I think accompanying flute should have been a supporter. Then it would be okay. The fact that you can do that and supporter again isn't great. I mean, because it's just too strong. You don't hit it like every time, but you play three accompanying flutes. You're probably getting something in play that now you can get stuck, and your probably opponent probably going to play as one Professor Turo scenario, and you may have just won the game. So I don't love that. You know, they Misfortune Sisters. We got Erica's Invitation. It's too much, too strong stuff. You know, and Handheld Fan now is actually I think pretty strong on the deck. At
I
that
don't
point of
think
that.
handheld fans that good. I think I've cut it from my Snorlax. I mean, I was playing Snorlax because it's pretty good
Mhm.
for ladder grinding, but then I stopped because it has certain issues.
Yeah,
In standard, I think it's top five still, top five best deck in the game. One in the top five,
Snorlax.
yeah, but I don't think it's the first. I don't think it's number one. I think it
Hmm.
was number one before Shadow Fable, but it was number one and number two, but now I don't think it's there. But um, yeah, anyway, I think let's move on to some other decks, right?
Okay. Yep, that's fair enough. And I think Pidgeot V is too strong. I actually take some issue with Rotom V as well. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about Charizard EX. I think Charizard Pidgeot. There are a few decks you want or a few cards you want to talk about. So you want to talk about Rotom V?
Yeah, hang on a second. I gotta what you talk about Rotom V while I call up Charizard
Yeah. So
here.
Rotom V has its ability Instant Charge. Well, it has an attack, but that's bad. Um,
Yeah, I don't.
I know you like the attack, but it's kind of trash. But I
Oh,
mean, it's
come
not stupid. It's
on.
not trash, but it's not. It's what's it called? I thought it was like a junk something. It's not junk something.
Scrap
Scrap
short.
short. But anyway, it's not very good. But then instant charges your ability. Once during your turn, you can draw three cards. But I don't know why it says once during your turn. But if you use this ability, your turn ends. So it's like I don't know, it's kind of like an attack, right? But you can use it from your bench and
Right.
then draws three. And we see cards like Cleffa, which are like attacks. I assume you don't think Cleffa is too good. Um,
No, I think that's fair in the game.
but you can use it from your bench, so you don't need to switch it in, and it draws three cards, and so it's very good, especially in Snorlax, but it's also good in a lot of stage two decks where you want bigger hands.
Right. And but you know, it's a soft target, so it's okay. The fact Rotom V sits on the bench obviously works well in control style decks where you're not attacking. Like a Snorlax deck where it's just an ability or an ability walling type deck. It's great for that. Drawing three cards helps set up a lot. And then, you know, the tool, which I think what I know I think we're going to bring up that for the V's, I think that pairs too well with it as well. Now you've got this really great start to a lot of games. I mean, I guess the
Yeah, Force
argument
Seal
why,
Stone, right?
yeah, I mean the argument why the Rotom V could be fair is that you're giving up a two prize target, right? That's not super high HP. So maybe in a Charizard deck, it's okay. Certainly the fact that it's so strong in like a Snorlax deck, I think that becomes problematic.
I guess. Oh wait, why do you think it's too good though? I feel like it's like okay, but you could also just play like raw draw supporters and stuff. Like I understand like you want to play other supporters, but also um I don't know. I feel like this is pretty similar to Cleffa, which is draw till you have 7 in hand, outside of the Snorlax example. But it's actually very similar to Tatsugiri from what sent Temple of Forces, I think. But Tatsugiri, which has the attack, which oh no, Paldean, what? Um, what sets the Tatsugiri from? Oh, Paradox
Wi-
Shift. There we go. So survival strategy. Search your deck for up to
Okay.
2 cards for 2 colorless. Put them into your hand,
Yeah.
then shuffle your deck. Switch it with one of your bench Pokemon. So then you can pair that with something like Snorlax, and
Uh,
you do
yeah.
need it in the active, but
Right. You're switching in, obviously, with Snorlax, if that's what you're playing. Snorlax, you can't just attach Rescue Board on because the retrieve cost is 4. Um, I mean, to me, I would prefer to see like Rotom V be dropped to like draw 2 cards. It would still see some play, but it would take a
maybe.
little. It might not. Maybe it's too big a nerf. Look, I think we're gonna take issue with I think Charizard EX itself. So probably Rotom V. I think more of it's in the Snorlax deck. I think it's problematic. The fact that you get to sit behind this great wall and draw 3 cards every turn, I think is just so you're going to have essentially what you want, and you don't have to ever worry about getting Iona to like 2 cards in hand because you're never taking prizes. So that's where I think it's problematic.
I guess, but I feel like that's like the point of control is to like control the game, and so you want to
Yeah.
have access to your resources. And Rotom V is it's kind of like an alternative to Pidgeot EX. Pidgeot EX decks do still play Rotom V, but you're going to only be
Hmm.
using it maybe a few turns throughout the game, maybe 5, which in normal game is most, but in control it's not. So it's like still okay, and it's still very good in Pidgeot control decks, but also
Hmm.
Pidgeot EX is the like core of the deck versus Rotom V is like the core of the Snorlax deck kinda. So I think it's like being good in one deck like I feel like then it would need you need to like we talked about nerfing Snorlax a lot, obviously. So then
Okay.
the Force Seal Stone thing I think is really where Rotom V becomes good, which is what you said as well. So I don't think
Hmm.
Rotom V would needs a nerf, but I think Force Seal
Yeah.
Stone, which is it's a tool which says it has a V-Star power on it. You can use 1 V-Star power per game, and you search deck for any card, put it into your hand, assuming it's attached to a Pokemon V, which can be a basic V. V-Star powers are generally in Pokemon V-Star, which are evolutions, but this one isn't, which is kind of interesting. I
Right.
think Force Seal Stone is probably. I think it could be an A spec. I think I've talked about this before, not on the podcast, but I think it could be an A spec, and then it takes up your A spec and your V-Star power for the game. And I think it would still see play. I think Force Seal Stone's really good. It's kind of weird. We take a look at Charizard EX. This list plays 2 tools and 4 copies of Arvin, which searches for a tool, which I think is like I know people do that, and it's because you get so much value off of Force Seal Stone. The other tool is
Right.
Defiance Band. Defiance Band is not bad, but it's not that good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't play. Yeah, you're playing Defiance Band because you're playing for Arvin. You're playing for Arvin. Well, first, I mean, getting an item's still very good too. So, I
It is.
mean,
It is.
but Forest Hill Stones is great. And like this list I'm looking at, the one I'm looking at, they play Unfair Stamp. So if you had to choose between Forest Hill Stone and Unfair Stamp, you might choose the Forest Hill Stone um, anyway for this list. But that's a better place, probably a more balanced place to be.
Yeah. Of course, I couldn't. I understand that Ace Backs were returned after Force Seal Stone was printed by a while, but
Yeah.
I still feel like it would be like more balanced that way. I think it could also be like it could only be attached to like V stars or V maxes and not basic Pokemon V. It would be much worse, but also I think it would still be okay. Notably, I think the best deck it saw play in, the deck it saw the most play in was Mew V Max, where it
Right.
really like it helped the deck out a lot. But it saw play in like Vapstick Urshifu V Max and
Hmm.
like looking through the decks, but it saw play in a lot of V Max decks when those were in format together. So I feel like it would still be okay if you could only use it on VMAX and V Stars. Not necessarily now, but it might be okay. But it would be good. Um, it would have been like really good previously.
Right. I mean, the V's, most of the V Maxes and even the V's have rotated at this point. So a year ago, it was a much different situation with Forest Seal Stone, and obviously it's rotating soon. But it probably had been too strong. Um, yeah, yeah, actually making it for maybe evolution Pokemon, that would have been
Yeah,
an interesting move to
evolution
stay.
Vs, right? Or
Yeah,
any
evolution
evolution.
V's. Yeah, so if V Maxes or V Stars,
Yeah,
I would think you give them the option on V Max as well, probably.
yeah. I could actually see
Um,
it on any evolution Pokemon. that'd be really weird. Obviously, then it could work on in single prize decks, but also single prize decks aren't very good, right? So, I feel like that's fine. And then it would be like very like you could now stick in like Gardevoir, which might be a little problematic, but also like um then it wouldn't be it's not this turn one card because right now in standard it's
Right.
like this turn one setting up card, making decks very consistent, especially when you're streaming it into a Pidgeot EX. Versus instead you'd have to get your some evolution in play before you can force Seal Stone, which could be interesting. Um, it might make it better, but I feel like it would make it more interesting. But it might also be more swingy because it's like, oh, you're already set up now, you can set up more. But
Yeah, and that's a good point, right? I mean, I think we both don't like decks that are inconsistent. So cards that help decks be consistent is good. I think Forest Seal Stone, that where it's fair is if your mindset you include it in V star decks that already have a V star power. So now it's Forest Seal Stone versus the net inbuilt V star. But the fact that yeah, you could put it in basic Vs or V maxes that wouldn't have V star powers, that's where they were already like top tier decks. That's where I think it pushed it to be too strong.
yeah, and there's also there's two other Seal Stones. There's Sky Seal Stone, which is okay. I mean, it was okay.
Hmm.
It's such a weird card. It allows you to take like extra prizes on V stars and V maxes, which don't really see much
Yeah.
play right now, and only by Pokemon Vs, basic Pokemon Vs. So it's like weird, um, but it's like it's all play. But now like no one's playing V stars and V maxes, or at least not
Right.
that people are, but nowhere to the nearest. Excuse me, nowhere near the level before. But and also like Iron Hands EX also exists, which does something kind of similar. But then there's also what's it? Earthen? No. Oh, yeah, Earth
Yeah.
and Steel Stone,
Earthen. Yeah.
which is like a spread attack, but it's also an attack, and it's like not that good. So yeah, I feel like Force Steel Stone's just like so much better than the other two as well.
Yeah, that's true. It out yeah. When there was very little doubt about for a deck which of the seal stones you'd pick, that shows a lack of balance, right? The forest seal stone was that's an indication it was too strong. Yeah.
And so what do you want to talk about next? Do you want to talk about Charizard EX itself?
Yeah, because I don't know that there's other cards as I'm looking at this list in particular. Well, I guess they're radiant, but yeah, let's talk Charizard EX. So, because I think it's too strong. I felt it was too strong when it was first announced, and I still think it is. Now by being too strong doesn't mean it's going to win every game. Don't take that. But I think it's just the fact that 330 HP is a still nice high number. It's not easy to one shot. Its attack, the good thing is it starts out at 180 damage. That's the one plus that keeps it being completely overpowered, but it's still pretty strong. And that is it ramps up 30 more per prize taken. As the game goes on, by the end of the game you can do 330 damage yourself if they've taken 5 prizes, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Which means if they've taken 4 prizes, then you're doing 300, I guess. So, and that's pretty rough, I think, honestly. And then the ability is what with that attack is just too, I think, too much. That you can accelerate up to 3 basic energies when you play it from hand to evolve your Pokemon, which you can do whether or not using Rare Candy. The only time it wouldn't work is if you used TM Evolution. So obviously you don't want to use that to go into the Charizard EX unless the energy is not an issue. But the fact is, its attack cost is 2, so I get 2 energies on that and a third energy. And I've been starting to play Charizard again more recently. So one of the things that happens, as long as I just have my Pokemon in the active with a retreat cost of 1, I can retreat it out as well. I don't have to worry about a switch, and that's a big deal too. So I honestly think the 3 energies is part of the problem with this card.
Yeah. So what do you nerf it to then?
Um, I would probably just let it accelerate 2 energies. I'm thinking. I think the damage numbers are okay. I might drop down the HP on the Pokemon.
Yeah, it's at
Um,
330. I'd say what would you drop it to?
I 10 or 20. I would drop. That's probably
I
all I
feel
would
like it
drop
wouldn't be
there.
much worse though. I feel like unless you drop it to something like 280, which is a 50 HP drop, I feel like it wouldn't
Hmm.
like really impact things that much. It certainly has like the highest HP of really any Pokemon that sees a play. There are a few Pokemon with like 340 that are certainly okay, but I don't actually know
Right.
if they're okay. And then there are like ways to buff HP, but we're not talking about that. And you can do this to Charizard, but um, Yeah, I feel like you could like nerf the HP some, but that doesn't impact things too much. I'd actually nerf the ability down to only one energy because two energy it
Okay.
still pays for itself. I feel like I
Hmm.
don't love the fact that you don't need to attach any energy from hand. So then energy just doesn't really matter. I feel like if you had it was just down to one, you'd accelerate the one and you'd attach one from hand. So you'd need an extra card to be able to attack every turn, which would be that energy card.
That could be good, actually. That probably makes it more balanced. Because I mean, the one of the tough things with Charizard when you play against it is you got to be very careful with taking prizes because you're just making their attack stronger, which can be very meaningful. But yeah, at this point, part of it, like this, let's see, the Charizard list I'm looking at here, I think what do they play? Like six energies, probably. They play
Yeah, six
six and a
energies is
missed
pretty common.
energies. This one plays seven, which is like crazy high for Charizard. And part of it's because the ability is so strong. So I would say make because if you reduced it to one energy acceleration, they probably have to play another energy or two because they're going to have to get energy in hand. And then the fact that you only have six energies means you have a lot of deck space as well. That's why you can play multiple stage twos and all these rare candies, which you'd have a tough time with otherwise, probably.
Yeah, and then as well as like a lot of I mean just so much stuff. We see Professor Toad's scenario in the list. I think we're looking at the same list.
Hmm.
Professor Toad's scenario, Enhanced Hammer, Mist Energy, Defiance Band, Collapse Stadium. All these cards are kind of like luxury cards. They're not always useful. They're not often
Right.
useful, but they are useful sometimes. And you have the just free deck space essentially. And you're a stage two deck as well. I definitely don't think Charizard EX is. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's very good. I don't think its designs like so stage twos were bad for a really long time.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
Big basics often dominate the format. Big basics are like just basic Pokemon that are have high HP, high damage output. Generally, like EXs or multi-prizers. And right
Hmm.
now they're like okay. They're certainly pretty like Reasonable Ogre Pond's one of the most played decks in the game right now, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's big basic. You got Miraidon EX. You got Roaring Moon EX, which is a little different because you damage yourself, but not that different. Even
Hmm.
Ancient Box is like a big basic deck. Lost Zone Box is a big basic deck. Not
Yeah.
exactly. They're kind of different, but and then you have stuff like I feel like there's some like the fire decks. Those are really usually big basic decks and things like that. So
Right.
also all the future and ancient Pokemon are basics. So I
Yeah.
think having good stage twos is good, but yes, Charizard's probably a little too good.
Yeah. Now, part of why for why we stage twos haven't been good for a while because we had V Maxes, V Stars being the high HP Pokemon and being the dominant Pokemon, and obviously they only evolved once, right?
Yeah.
So,
So I guess stage
um,
ones haven't actually been good because they're not stage ones, but they've been they're okay. I mean stage ones are kind of bad now, honestly, but like Bibarel is pretty good. Um, yep. I can't think
yeah,
of any other stage ones that really see play like that much play outside of like Charmeleons and stuff that evolve into stage twos and like Curly Dracloaks. They're good, but also like they're different.
right. Well, I mean, it's the multi-prize rule box Pokemon that are probably too strong in the game. I would think, and I think you probably agree on that too, right? It kind of single prize decks, basic or evolving, are difficult, right? They're hard to come by. I would say. I mean, look with the V Maxes and the V Stars, you can kind of think of them as stage ones, right? They're not, but there's it's a
Yeah.
single
Uh-huh.
evolution, so it's they're pretty comparable to like a stage one EX in a lot of ways. So um, you just couldn't. So for 3 years, you only had the only stage twos were single prize in the game, and you had these high HP Pokemon that did damage that you couldn't get up, set up really a stage two single prize deck really and have much hope.
Yeah, the only ones that saw play. I'm just gonna go take a quick look at what. Let's see. Let's do the Silver Tempest meta.
Hmm.
We of course. So Archeop's still in standard, but that one was good. But like that's not really stage two. You don't play the basic or the stage one. And then there
Right.
were it was the Inteleons, but they were support Pokemon, and you played the stage one, and the stage one was not the only reason why it was good, but the big reason. Um,
Right.
then you also had that's about it here, but there was like Decidueye, but that had like an
Hmm.
auto win against like half the decks in the game. So like that's also kind
Right.
of different. And then there's things like
There was the single strike Beedrill, right?
oh yeah, which she didn't play the basic. And there's the Empoleon as
Exactly.
well, which you also didn't play the basic. There's Ludicolo here, which supported a big basic.
Mm.
There was this is really hard to find stage twos. Yeah, no, and like Ludicolo is like kind of good, but
Right.
um,
But again, but that was again a support Pokemon. It buffed in that case a lot of times like your Suicune or your Palk, right? Something
yeah,
like that, a big
Suicune.
basic.
Oh, obviously
So
Suicune also saw play, and Rillaboom. Like there's some Pokemon, but they're also not super good, and also, um,
right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, I think so. Charizard, I don't mind having stage two is good. I definitely like it. Do you think Pidgeot EX is too good?
That's a really good question. I think it's borderline too good. I think it's probably okay. I mean, they saved it by making quick search only being able to be used once per turn, right? If you could do
I
multiple,
guess.
I think it'd be too much. And I was a big fan of well, the Malamar, the Rapid Strike. I know, and but the reason I bring that up is that the artillery was important in that deck, and that was also only once per deck,
Once
as
per
a
turn.
searching once per turn. That one I don't think needed that restriction. I don't think
No, yeah,
I
I
think
don't think it was okay.
I mean, if you went to the bother of getting a second artillery set up, I don't think the rapid strike decks will be overpowered here. Searching for multiple cards every turn, I think would be too much. Obviously, we have it with the Thwacky, right, with its ability to search. But that one's, from my experience thus far, is not easy to set up. So I think that has it's balanced by just its awkwardness. Whereas this, you could get two Pidgeot EXs set up over the course of a game a lot of times, and searching for any two cards, I think, might just be too much.
Maybe I feel like I mean two Pidgeots, then it is obviously very good, but also like it's kind of awkward to set up. It would be very good in control
Yeah.
though. Um, I think it's a little the one thing I don't like about Pidgeot, actually, I'm playing against it. It's like
Hmm.
Iono, it's not useless, but if your opponent needs a card to win, there are a lot of times
Yeah.
you're like Iono, my opponent needs boss to win. Now like Iono's not doing anything, and there aren't really any ways to counter Pidgeot EX.
Right.
There's Iron Thorns EX, and Iron Thorns EX is like okay, but Pidgeot EX like yeah, that's really the only counter. Um, I could
Hmm.
actually see increasing its retreat cost.
Yeah, that's
Um,
what I was thinking. Because the fact that it's a pivot as well, that adds a lot of value in these decks. So to make the Pidgeot player make another decision, maybe add a pivot card, which makes things worse, or having to figure out knowing what they're the fact you could just send up Pidgeot and then just figure out your turn after that, I think is a bit too much.
Yeah, yeah, and I also think generally we talk about control and how that's kind of annoying, but also I think it is um, kind of important thing in the game to be able to trap support Pokemon to buy yourself a turn, and also you
Yeah.
could trap them with, and then or you could like boss it up and then send Flutter Mane to the active where now it turns off their ability. But if you do it with Pidgeot, they literally just retreat and then use their ability, so that doesn't like do anything. So
Right.
you could technically do something, but it's pretty bad. So and so Pidgeot EX, I feel like making it just one retreat. I get why it has free retreat. Um, Also, I do think it's very important that it has like low HP. It's the lowest H.
Yeah.
I think it's lowest HP for a stage two EX in standard. I'm just gonna real quick check that. But yeah, obviously, I think it's a good card, but I think it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, they kept the HP low and they kept the attack not very good. So I would say, it reduce adding a retreat cost of at least one would change it if we're concerned. I think it's like at the high end of fair though, myself. And I think you kind of agree.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about another card that I mentioned a few times, which is Iron Thorns EX, which is to me that card is not good. Well, it's good. It's not
You
a
were just playing that, weren't you?
I was because it's too good. I don't know if it's too good, but it's Iron Thorns EX. It has an attack which is mediocre, but it has its ability initialization. As long as it's in the active Pokemon with the rule box in play, both yours and your opponents have no abilities except for future Pokemon, which is kind of like funny. It's so that it doesn't like counter
Yeah.
itself. But anyways, so Iron Thorns EX is it's pretty good. If you look at the meta right now, it counters. I'm just gonna go through the decks. Gardevoir counters Gardevoir EX.
Yep.
Raging Bull Ogerpon counters Tumas
Check.
Ogerpon
Yep.
EX. Lugia Archeops, yes, it definitely beats that.
Got
You
it.
should not be losing that matchup if you're playing Iron Thorns, unless they play like a canceling clone. Draco, which probably plays Ogerpon. It does not counter Lost Zone, but it does counter Treasure Pidgeot. It doesn't counter Dragapult. But I mean, they might be playing Pidgeot Ants
Right.
as well. Then Gym Power Excalibur, I guess it doesn't. It kind of counters that. It's not like um, an auto win is not an auto loss. Snorlax, it does counter the Rotom V, and also they're not boss trapping anything if you're just playing Iron Thorn GX. And then
Right.
Miraidon, we can go down the list. It counters mostly a lot of the top decks though, to the
Yeah.
point where you can't. There is not really any counterplay outside of maybe Fluttermane slash Klefki, but also like those are
Yeah.
kind of sketchy. So I feel like Iron Thorn ZX isn't like interesting. It doesn't have much counterplay. Um, and so like Path to the Peak it was a stadium with essentially the same effect as Iron Thorn ZX's ability.
Right.
That card was definitively too good, right?
Yeah, I think it was too easy to just kind of ruin people's game plans for too many decks. So,
Yeah, and it was like definitely. I'm pretty sure it's definitely the best. Oh no, it's not the best stadium ever. I don't know. It's pretty close. Broken Time Space is really good. I don't know, like, but that's broken in his name. Like that card is probably the most broken card ever. Um, maybe not. It's pretty absurd. But like in the modern era, it's like pretty clearly the best stadium, Path to the Peak. So, yeah, I feel like Iron
yeah.
Thorns. I don't know. Would you nerf it, or do you think it's like too, I don't know, good or too annoying? I think it's too annoying. I don't like its design that much.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying. I mean, it's pretty rough, right? It's part of what I don't like is it's super matchup dependent, right? It's got a lot of auto win matchups, and then it's got a few matchups that aren't auto wins, in which case sometimes they become super struggles to win for you to win because your damage output's pretty low. It's 140. You probably have a double turbo attached. You're doing 120. Um,
And then you
the
move
one
the
thing,
energy. And if you
right?
have another Pokemon on the bench, then it's going to be potentially a struggle to chain attacks. You do have the Future Boost Energy Capsule. You have things to do, but it's certainly more awkward.
The positive side to Iron Throne, because I played it some myself, is because it moves energy to the bench, it gets a little tricky with that whole sequencing, which is the interesting part. I think it's a little more interesting deck to play than the Snorlax deck. The Snorlax gets interesting games at times, but the interesting game is largely dependent upon what your opponent does to counter you.
I
Whereas
think
Iron
Snorlax
Thorns,
is more interesting than Iron Thorns. I feel like to me, like Iron Thorns EX, you're not making many decisions. You're making like one or two decisions a turn, um, which are somewhat obvious decisions. It's like what support do I want to play here, and they kind of have ramifications if you make the wrong decision. But like to me, so I play a lot of control. Snorlax has there's generally more cards you can play because Iron Thorns EX, I think you play like a lot of supporters. So
yeah, let me call
I
up
mean,
a
you play a lot of
list here.
supporters in control. Oh yeah, so Iron Thorns EX, it's like list. The number of
It's
unique cards is really low.
it's probably a lot of four ofs, right? Because you're really top decking. It's a four Pokegear deck, which I kind of like, but that means you're just top decking and get four Arven, four Boss, four Colress, three Judge, three Aerate. As I'm looking through this list, so it's a lot of four ofs, and it's a four hammer deck. This list, and if hammers aren't good, I don't think anybody likes to see
Yeah,
hammers.
specifically Crushing Hammer. There are different hammers. I feel like Enhanced Hammer is like,
That's
I feel
true.
like people don't really. I feel like that's like a pretty fair card. I mean, Crushing Hammer
Yeah,
might be fair, but it's also random. But yeah, and then like Snorlax has a lot of different like moving pieces. Um, if you aren't careful, you can lose. Because you can just like I don't know. I feel like Snorlax takes a lot of like opponent's deck knowledge. Iron Thorns EX doesn't. Like you're not gonna accidentally play the wrong Pokemon because you
you
can't.
got one Pokemon.
So
Yeah,
I feel like Snorlax is harder. I think to me Snorlax is a hard deck to play. Maybe I mean I don't know. A lot of the top decks are like kind of hard to play. To me, it's harder than most. It's like if you can play it like well though, it's really good. Versus like Iron Thorns EX, you just kind of stick it there. Like if you're playing Lugia, and you're against Iron Thorns EX. Um, the player not playing Iron Thorns EX is also like kind of in control of the game, or they're the one making the difficult decisions.
that's true. I like Iron Thorns. Your decision is, do I bench a second Iron Thorns or not? Because that whole energy movement can be very problematic, and you might miss attacks. So it's like, can they one shot me next turn? So do I want two Pokemon in play or one? That's kind of the biggest decision you're making with Iron Thorns every turn. Honestly,
Yeah, but honestly, you also want Pokemon in play. Like you can if you're gonna Team Turbo Energize, which is really good in the deck, then you will Iron Thorns. You need to play a second one. So I feel like you generally have a second one, and then it's like I
Mhm.
know there's some kind of interesting decisions, but not that many. Um, but I don't. Would there be any changes you'd make to the card?
I mean, the question with Iron Thorns is it's not played that much, right? I mean, it's the whatever it is, the 20th most played deck or something like that, the
I mean, it is
19th, right,
played in
of the last format.
it's played in like future and or Lost Zone decks sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, it's like okay in those. It's pretty solid, and I feel like it's fair in those as well because there's counterplay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that. Decks that play in Iron Thorns plus other things, I think, is fair. The question is Quad Iron Thorns unfair? The problem is it's a little bit too straightforward and simple, right? It's too simple for a top deck, I think, and especially a control style deck, right? Being simple and good, I think is probably not the combination I like. That's why I don't like Snorlax. Again, both Quad Thorns and Snorlax are both above 50% win rate, which most of the decks are not. So to me, having a simple control deck shouldn't that wins a lot. That's not a combo I'm in favor of.
Yeah. Oh, I got an idea. So there's a card, the Great Tusk EX. Is there one? No, there's two. The
I
bad
think,
Great
yeah.
Tusk, the newer one, has an
Hmm.
ability. No, yes. It says if it's in play, or I think if it's in the active, you discard the top 5 cards of your deck. So add that onto Iron Thorns EX's ability. Maybe not five, or I can make it into an attack. But I think it would be an ability that says its initialization, same thing, like stops abilities, but then
Hmm.
you're discarding cards from your own deck. So you have a timer. So this encourages you to do one of two things. One is don't leave it in the active too long. You can get it out of there once you got some more
Right.
powerful attacker set up. Or two, you need to win the game quickly before you lose. So I think it'll make it like Iron Thorns feels like these long games that just kind of like go on and are really boring. And I think you could do the same thing with Snorlax actually, where you like self mill yourself, which is bad.
Hmm.
Like there are certain reasons to self mill, but not usually. So you have a wall, but then there's some downside, like actively happening to you as well.
Yeah, I mean the other thing, which I think the fact it's a future Pokemon's a bit of a problem because the future booster energy capsule really makes it work.
With those
If it didn't,
switching, right?
right, which it needs, and they gave it retreat cost of 4 to make it problematic. So if you didn't have the tool with it, but you had to have a switch card or just a regular switch every turn to make attacks happen, then it's a lot more balanced. Then you're going to struggle, you're going to miss attacks along the way, and your opponent has a much better chance of pulling it off. So I think that tool is a big deal. Plus, it gives you back that 20 more damage. And getting to 180 versus, I mean, 140 versus 120 is a big deal because if you're hitting 140, then you double 2 hits, you're doing 280, you're taking a lot multi-prize knockouts then pretty regularly in a lot of matchups. And that's a big deal, right? If you had to be down at 120 every time you're three-shotting like that 280 HP Pokemon, and that's what gives your opponent a lot more time to navigate things as well.
Yeah. So I think Iron Thorns though it's not like super good. Um, but it's like it feels pretty fair in decks that it's not like the only Pokemon in, but then in the Quad Iron Thorns deck, it's
Yeah.
like not fun.
Well,
I think
maybe we want the rule you can't play a deck that only has one Pokemon in it.
I
So that you
guess I
can't
feel
play
like
Quad Thorns, you can't play Quad Snorlax,
yeah, but no
with
one's playing
nothing else.
Quad Snorlax. I mean
That's
that
true.
might not be true. There are probably people playing Quad Snorlax, but I don't know. I mean
Yeah.
that's like kind of weird.
I know. I know.
That actually could be like fair. I don't know. Anyway, so I think let's talk about the Radiant Pokemon now, though. So let's start
Okay.
with Radiant Greninja. Radiant Greninja is, if you know anything about the meta, you know that Radiant Greninja is definitely the best Radiant. There are other ones that are okay, like Radiant Alakazam we mentioned earlier. But Radiant Greninja has
Right.
two parts to it. It has its ability. By the way, it has 130 HP, which is on the higher end for the Radiants. Actually, that might not be true, but
Well,
there's certainly some
yeah.
that are lower than it. There are some that are higher, but it's solid for certainly a Pokemon, a basic
Hmm.
Pokemon. By concealed cards, you can discard an energy from your hand, and then you get to draw 2 cards, which is that's pretty good. Then we have Moonlight Shuriken
Yeah.
for 3 energies, 2 water, and a colorless. Discard 2 energies from this Pokemon, and it does 90 to 2 your opponent's Pokemon. Um, that's pretty
Yeah.
good. I think the attack isn't too good. I think it's like fair. I think it's definitely one of the best attacks on Radiant Pokemon. Most of them are pretty boring and bad, but also
Hmm.
I think it's okay, and obviously you're not going to use it in like other type decks that aren't water.
Well, you attack with it in Lost Zone potentially, which
Well,
isn't
yeah,
a
but that
water
has
deck per
water
se.
energy.
No, I get it, but
It's
it's not
probably
a water
mostly
deck
water.
though.
Yeah,
Depending on the build, water and it could just be the water psychic, right? If it's Radiant Greninja, Cramorant, and Sableye, right? That was an older style way to build that deck, right?
yeah,
So look, I think the attack is actually part of the problem, though. Look, the ability you discard one, draw two. It's very good. It's on a basic. I mean, one energy, right? So it's restricted energy. That part's good, but most decks play a bunch of energy. So when a basic with that discard one, draw two ability is pushing being too good. Um, but I think the paired the attack, those decks that can attack with it as well make the game very rough. Obviously, Chen Pao Excalibur can power it up easily, and they can chain attacks, they can recover it, and it's a basic you can attack with the following turn, even if you get knocked out. So that's pretty scary. Like I said, Lost Zone can pull off the attack as well. And doing 90 to 2 on the bench can ruin a lot of games for people. Probably nerfing the HP, making it like thinking of the Lost Zone, dropping it to say 110, so Cramorant would one shot it.
maybe.
Would that might help in that matchup? I know. So what do you think?
I think for the attack, I might nerf it to 90 to 1 instead of 90 to
Okay,
2, which obviously is much worse. Then you wouldn't like attack with it very often, but also like that's fair.
right.
I think like its ability is really good. Or I could instead of seeing like I could say see it being like um maybe 70 to 2. 70 to 2 would still be about as good. Maybe 60 to 2. 60 to
Hmm.
2 would be much worse. Buddy Buddy Poffin it's very good right now.
Right.
And is kind of defining a basic Pokemon. So you want Pokemon with exactly 70 HP. You could have less, but you want 70 if you can. And so then you have Radiant Greninja. If it did 60, then you could Hawlucha and then knock him out, which could be fair. So I guess I'd say 62 would be fair. I could see the ability of just drawing one card. That would obviously be a pretty big nerf, but also most of the Radiant Pokemon are kind of bad outside of Radiant Greninja. There's Radiant Charizard, and there's some that are like balanced, but a lot of them are like pretty useless.
Yeah, I like the idea of dropping it to hitting one Pokemon because the problem right now is it could take out your opponent's Pokemon is because we have these stage 2 Pokemon that and we like that in the game. If you can take out two of the basics that they're trying to evolve from, potentially you keep your opponent from getting set up. Once you get them that they lose their attacker, you keep them from setting up, and that's not a fun place to be. So if you just did 90 to 1, then that can still win you games. Having the option in a deck and attack to hit the bench is always a good thing. You have it there mainly for the ability. You attack even a little less than you do now. I think that might bring it into a better place.
Yeah. And then I think let's talk about Radiant Charizard now, which has
Yeah.
that's it's pretty different. So Radiant Greninja really good in the early stage of the game, but then Radiant Charizard
Right.
really good in the late. With its ability Excited Heart, its attack cost is one colorless less for each prize your opponent's taken. With Combustion Blast 250 for 5, 4 which are
Yeah.
colorless, one of which is fire, does 250 and cannot attack back-to-back turns, assuming it doesn't switch out. So 250 is a lot on a basic single prize here.
Yes.
So it's a lot on anything honestly. Palafin EX does 250. It is one, but this is one if you near the end of the game. And that's a stage two.
Right.
It's a stage one multi-prizer, but really it's like not a stage one. It's closer to a stage two than a stage one because it's pretty awkward getting to play. So
Right.
yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think
Also, Blood Mirror Liniax, I want to mention, it's pretty similar. It's a single, or it's not a single pricer. It's not a radiant, so you can play it in any deck. And then it also is, it's all colorless, but it has higher HP, but it does give up 2 prizes. So I feel like that one's also too good. They're different because the ones are radiant, but they're very similar in what they actually do.
yeah, I mean, look, I think Radiant Charizard is too good. I mean, I think it's definitely. I think we would both say Radiant Greninja is the number one. Radiant and Radiant Charizard is a strong number two, and then you have a big fall off after that. I think to what would be number three. Um, Obviously, if you play any fire energy, this is just a great option to include in your deck. It probably needs to, I don't know. It probably shouldn't be able to attack for one energy once they've taken 4 prizes, or they maybe should have to take 5 prizes before it can attack for one energy. Something like that.
Yeah, that'd probably
I,
be fair. Yeah, I feel like it's not like super broken right now. It's pretty good and kind of annoying to play around. But I think yeah, increase it by one Carlos, and I'd also do that for Blood Mercer Luna EX, especially because that can use double turbo energy. It does hit slightly less damage, but yeah, I feel like
right.
that would be fair, just increasing it by one Carlos, which actually does it changes it some certainly. But in like Charizard EX, you can accelerate energies, so it's not that big of a deal. But like in Charizard EX, you can do this. You can literally do this turn two. That's pretty absurd. Like that's probably not happening. You need to attach both of the first two turns and then accelerate, but that is possible. I guess you could technically not attach either turn and then double charge IDX, but like I've not seen that ever. So
Yeah, you're probably yeah, that's not probably not happening. But I haven't played a ton of decks with Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, so I don't have a ton of experience. And I honestly haven't seen a lot of people playing it when I matched on the ladder. It's very I've only I it's been a handful of games I've only probably ever seen it played against me as well.
well, I think it's because people like either quit or I don't know if you quit much. I sometimes quit though.
Hmm.
I try not to because it's like kind of toxic. But people quit a lot on ladder and it's an end game card.
That's
So
yeah,
like you don't see it. People definitely just like toss down Radiant Charizard. It's a single prizer, so it's not that bad. You should generally save it till later on. But I definitely see it like tossed down. Blue Mercy next. I definitely see. I mean, I play it a bunch as well. It's really good. I mean, it can literally go in any deck because it's maybe not every deck, but pretty much any deck. It can literally attack for free. So
right.
yeah, I feel like increasing it by one colorless though. Both of them would be pretty fair.
Okay. That might be right. I certainly think Radiant Charizard, maybe for Blood Moon Ursaluna. I am glad that it's 240, not 250. Probably doesn't matter, but it probably it helps some. Certainly against the V's with the tool that gives you 30, right? So now
Yeah,
you can
choice
just
spell,
hitting
or I was gonna say Defiant Span, but yeah, for hitting V stars
right for
specifically.
V stars too. So 240 versus 250 was probably that was a smart decision on
Yeah,
that.
but now I actually want to talk about some cards I think need buffs. I
Okay.
don't know if they need buffs, but I want to talk about the Ogre Pawns, and I guess we'll talk about Reasonable Ogre Pawn. But I want to talk about the Ogre Pawns first. There's five of them, but there's four EXs. I'm not gonna read out what they all do because I don't want to do that. But wait, wait, ogre's mask is spelled differently? Okay. So I want to specifically talk about the ogre pawn deck with the ogre's mask. Ogre's mask says it switches a Pokemon EX in play. It switches one of your ogre pawn EXs in play with one of your ogre pawn EXs in the discard. And then you keep the stuff on it, including the
Right.
energies, which is in damage counters. So it's kind of interesting. The idea is there's four of them. There's the grass one, which accelerates energy to it and also does draw you cards, which is certainly strong in the game right now.
Yep.
There's the water one, which has two attacks. The first attack is a retreat stopping attack. The second attack is a snipe slash spread attack, kind of like Radiant Greninja, but it is a two prizer. And then there's the
Mhm.
fighting one, Cornerstone Master Pine EX, which walls ability Pokemon. It has a very usable attack. And then there's the fire one, which is bad. It's not actually completely useless, but if I'm looking at just the limitless, straightforward competitive database, okay, the fighting one hasn't seen that much play. It definitely sees play. These haven't been in too many tournaments, but like the other three have seen play. The fire one has not.
Yeah.
It has two attacks. The first one, Wrathful Hearth, does for Fire colorless 20 reach damage counter on this Pokemon with zero base damage. So if you're hit into and not knocked out, it is very good. But that's not going to happen that commonly. And even if it does, um, like how strong will this be? It really depends how much your opponent's hitting you for. So it's okay
Right.
in the context of the deck. And then the second attack is for three fires. And it's pretty good if it does 140 or 280 to an evolution. Oh, and you discard energy from this Pokemon. I didn't even know that because I have never played this, never seen it, or I've played it in the Ogerpon deck once,
Right.
but you can't use that attack. So
Right. Like this deck list that I'm looking at. First off, the top Ogerpon list. Well, first, when you looked at the Snorlax decks, it was like first place, second place of like 200 people tournaments. Here, it's the first place was 45 people, then it goes to fifth, 16th, 10th. Like the performance is not particularly
oh,
good.
this person came in clutch 103rd of 258. Now that's like that's like it's okay. I mean they finished
They
3 and 6. It's
finished
not great. Um,
yeah.
but they're on the list. Obviously, this it's not it's played a lot less. But yeah, and the first
Right.
place deck is like Raging Bull Ogrepon pretty much. It does
Right.
play Ogre's Mask. It's
It
kind
does
of
it does
cool.
play that. It doesn't play the fire one though, but they do
No.
play three raging bolts. So it's kind of a raging bolt Ogerpon with the tech
Yeah,
options of
which
the
is
other.
really cool. I want to try this deck. I saw this deck floating around. So it's Raging Bull Ogrepon. I imagine most of you know that deck. But then it plays the Cornerstone Master Ogrepon EX. That's not uncommon. But it plays
Right.
Wellspring Master Ogrepon EX, the water one with the snipe attack and the gust attack, or sorry, the trap attack. It's really interesting. It plays Great Tusk. It plays Flutter Mane, which isn't crazy. And it plays
Mhm.
Iridas and like Ogre's Masks and stuff. So pretty interesting there.
Yeah, look. First, I don't think the teal mask Ogerpon needs to be buffed.
No,
Right.
no,
I
I
think
don't think I don't think it's too good, but I don't think it needs to be buffed.
right. The fact it only draws you one is good, right? If it drew multiple, because you already have to have the energy in hand. So if it drew two, I think it'd be too good going on. But I think it's fair. In the question is like the water one, Wellspring. It's not bad, right?
No, I think that one's pretty balanced as well.
Yeah, you can stall them out. Right now, you do 20 damage, and once double turbo rotates, you can't avoid doing the damage. So that hurts you for that. And then, but it's okay still. 20 is not terrible. You can still get them stuck a bunch of turns. And then torrential pump 100 to one and 120 to another, pretty solid there. And I think the cornerstone mask one is pretty good too, isn't it?
Yeah,
With
I
its
think this one's
because
the
its
best
ability
one,
strong.
honestly. Because it like has auto wins against I don't know if auto wins, but it's like really good against Charizard. Honest, I mean, okay, the deck should beat Charizard if it's like working because the grass one's pretty bad
Grass,
for it,
right?
but also
You're one shotting
yeah,
the EX, the stage two EX with
yeah,
your basics. So that's not a bad place.
yeah. But yeah, I think
Um,
the fighting one's balanced. You don't think it needs a nerf or a buff, right?
no, I think it's pretty fair. I'd probably keep it like it is. Obviously, the fact that it hits through effects, I guess that's necessary to keep it balanced. Obviously, something that can like Mew EX, obviously you're not immune then. But I guess that's necessary to keep things balanced. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm
well,
not
it's a
sure.
classic example. I think we talked about it with we talked about something before already in the video of I think with Iron Thorn GX it was abilities, but it's if you're in the mirror, you're not like stuck forever. So
Right.
yeah, they do that all the time. We see it with like essentially every Pokemon like this, but it's yeah, it's that's why it's there.
That's what is there. The fire one though, that's the one that's not very good, right? That's the one you'd like to see buffed.
Yeah, so I assume you don't really have you haven't thought about this, right?
Well, the question, let me just, I don't know, you may have some ideas, but the HPs, they're all the same, so I'm not going to change that. Um, I think the first attack's okay
It's
on
okay.
it.
I think it's a little underwhelming.
So you could do that. And the second attack is useless basically because you're with this one when you play it, because I did with the Ogre Pond deck, I did play this. I didn't use it much. But the idea is you have your grass or whichever the other one you're attacking with, they damage you but don't knock you out, and you're swapping into this, and you just slap on one fire energy, and you already have the other two energies on it, right? So
Yeah.
the
And if
design
it's a
is to use the
Luminous, you
first
already
attack,
have. Yeah.
right? So and then you're doing, but if they hit you at 200, then you're doing 400. You're very happy. But if they're getting that close, they're probably knocking you out, right? So they're doing like 140, let's say, but you're okay with that 280, not bad. So I think the first attack is okay. It's the second attack I think needs to it probably should have the same attack cost as the first, maybe.
Yeah, so I think yeah, I'd make the second attack fire colorless. Colorless. It could see play in Charizard EX. It would still be
Mhm.
pretty much almost exactly as good in Charizard EX if you change that attack cost. It could see play in some other decks as well. It's pretty similar, but except for the Ogre Pond deck, where it's actually really good. You can actually use it. It's not like insane. I don't think it's like some super broken Pokemon, but it's also all right. And the deck's pretty bad right now. And then I'd change the first attack. I'd reduce it by one colorless to fire colorless. It doesn't change things too
Okay.
much. I think the one interesting thing is because most of the time you will be getting one-shotted, but with the fighting Ogerpon, a lot of Pokemon, Charizard EX probably one-shotting you, right? But it's not because you're not being hit by Charizard EX. So then they go in with their uh, Charmanders or whatever. They go in with whatever, and some Pokemon that's potentially not one-shotting you, and then you can
Mhm.
switch. I feel like you're often getting one-shotted, so the first attack's not super useful. Um, I could also see like giving it some base damage, but I don't know if that's really necessary. Generally, attacks like this are bad, right? I think.
Yeah, generally they are. I mean, like well, it's similar to the old Reshazard,
Yeah,
right?
that's the only one that I would. That's the one I was thinking of. Reshiram and Charizard tag team, which is 30 base and 10 more for each damage kind of attached to it, and you would definitely use it for the 30 base, right? Like it's not good, but it also is your cheapest attack, right? So,
Right. And the Pokemon was very tanky, right? It was what, 270 HP,
yeah,
I
it
think.
was pretty tanky. Would generally survive hits, but certainly would get one shot sometimes, and depends on the deck and matchup and stuff.
Right, but there weren't that many Pokemon that were had higher HP at that time, right?
Not when it came out, but certainly by the time it
Right.
rotated.
But
Um,
this, when it came out at 210, was already low for a basic EX, really. For an attacking, there are a lot of basic EXs. Probably I would expect more 220 to be standard,
Yeah,
right?
220 feels pretty normal for attackers. Support Pokemon tend to be much lower. Squawkabilly is down there at 160, which is really low. It's really the lowest two prize we've seen in quite a long time. That is actually like at that HP. There was like some 160 HP Vs, but they all had like defensive abilities. So um,
Right. The problem I have, though, if we wanted to buff the HP on this one, you're still wanting to generally swing it in from one of the other Ogerpons, so you'd have to buff those as well, HP wise, and they're probably pretty fair now. They might be get too strong, right? If you
I
buff
wouldn't
those
change the
HPs,
HP. I mean, I could see him at like 220, but I think the HP is all right. Um, but yeah, I could
and then
see it being like 30 base damage or something like that.
just increasing the wrathful hearth a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, 30 plus 20 per.
yeah, something like that. And I think Ogre's Mask is okay. Ogre's Mask, like I feel like you could say it switches like either any Pokemon Ogerpon with any other Pokemon or any other Pokemon with Ogerpon, or something
Hmm.
like that, so it can switch into other things. Because Ogre's Mask is like you often criticize decks that are built in like to a set,
Yeah,
and obviously this card's like that. Other Ogerpons aren't. I mean, they kind of are, but they're not just built into the Ogerpon deck. You know, they see play in not the Ogerpon deck because the Ogerpon deck doesn't really see much play. So yeah.
right.
Also,
Well,
it's really funny. The water Ogrephon has seen more play in fire decks than the fire Ogrephon.
yeah, no, the fire one is definitely the one that's just not very good. The other thing with Ogre's Mask, there is, at least at this point, there is one single prize Ogrepon. I don't know if there's gonna be more. I don't see why they didn't at least make it so you could switch into any Ogrepon.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of weird. I mean, it has much less HP, but it's like not that good. Um, I feel like they're just adding more text just to add more text, which
Hmm.
is kind of weird. So
Well, because like if you've given up four prizes and you could then swing in from your two prize or into the single prize, or now your opponent needs to have boss to have game the following turn. So
that's
there's
true.
there's
That's true.
times you'd swing from an undamaged Pokemon into the single
Yeah.
prizer.
By the way, what it has, it does 20 and 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon for grass colorless, which is like not the best, but there are times it'll like knock
No.
out like comfies and stuff. So it's not great, but it could see play. If you had the Ogre's Mask switched and the Ogre Fine deck was any good, but yeah.
Yeah, look, it's not terrible, the Ogrepon deck. I think it's a little underexplored, is what I'd say, but it's also a little underwhelming too.
Yeah, but then I think let's talk about Raging Bull Ogerpon a little bit to wrap things up here because
Yeah.
that deck's is that the number one deck you see on the ladder? It's definitely the number one deck I see on the
Uh,
ladder, or it has been. Um,
I think it might be. It's pretty common. It was. I think it's fallen off. I don't think it's the number one deck anymore, but it's pretty
yeah.
popular.
Yeah, and so I think you said so. I don't think Raging Bolt EX itself is too good. It has high HP, but also one thing I feel like Gravy Charm isn't great in the deck. I mean it's okay, it's good. I feel like Ancient Booster Energy Capsule would be better sometimes, but anyways,
Yeah.
because it's almost I don't think I've seen Bravery Charm really useful on anything other than Raging Ball. No, that's not true. I have seen it useful on other Pokemon, but within the Raging Ball deck, but not commonly. But um,
Yeah.
I think so. You think the problem is Professor Saw's vitality, right?
Yeah, I mean, Raging Bolt, it's 240 HP, which is nice. And then with the tool, like you said, when I match into it, it's the ancient tool is the problem because then it takes it to 300 on a basic Pokemon, and that's pretty rough. I usually can't one shot it. And it attacks for just 2 energy. And because of the Teal Mask Ogre Pond, it's easy to get energies into play. So they get the damage level set up quickly. What needs to happen is it needs to be harder to get the energy on for the attack. And with Pesticide's Vitality, it's pretty easy. You can power it up pretty consistently in the deck, I think. Plus, Radiant Greninja again just helps falls in with this deck very well too.
Yeah, I think so Welder, right? We talked about Reshizard. Welder is a supporter, accelerating
Hmm.
2 energies from your hand to one of your Pokemon, then you draw 3 cards.
Yeah.
Very similar to Professor Saw's Vitality. I feel like um Welder, like Professor Saw's Vitality is to me the first card that's really like Welder that we've seen that actually is like seen a lot of success.
Hmm.
Maybe Melanie. Melanie is kind of different though. Notably, it doesn't accelerate 2 energies. It only accelerates one. And
Yeah.
so it's just not as like impactful. I mean, you played Melanie a lot, and I played it some, right? You played it with Ice Rider.
Yeah, Ice Rider and yeah, and some other water decks too with
Yeah.
the V's. I mean, I think right. I think the sense was Welder was overpowered, so so Melanie was the nerf of Welder by just accelerating 1 energy,
Yeah, but
which
then Saw's Vitality is now it's not to the same Pokemon, which is it'd probably be better if it was to the same Pokemon, but
right.
I feel like it's still very good and also has the same effect of like warping your deck um around Professor Saw's Vitality, like it was kind of warped around Welder. If you miss Professor Saw's Vitality, that's really bad.
Yeah,
Sometimes, usually, not all the time, sometimes you want other supporters, but usually you want it. And same thing with Welder. So you're like doing everything in your power to get Saw's Vitality, because if you don't, you're in a really bad position. But if you do, you're in a really good position.
right. But I think for Stada's Vitality is pretty good because for a deck like this, the attackers are all 2 energy attackers, so you don't need to get 2 energies accelerated on 1 turn. You can actually set up your current attacker and then you get your next attacker set up with just manually attaching, and that's pretty payable with a deck like this.
Yeah, I think would you nerf this card? I feel like it's close to being
I
like too
think
good.
what I would do, and I think like Iron Thorns, I think shouldn't be a future Pokemon. I think Raging Bolt should not be an ancient Pokemon. I think it would make it more fair because then it would lose Professor Sada's vitality, and you could still get the 70 setup, but now you're going to need with like the Teal Mask Ogre Pond, you're going to need to play the energy switches to, that's just a lot less
Well, but
consistent,
then
right?
you
You're going to
can't. But that still doesn't pay the attack cost.
That's true.
So
That's true.
like
I,
Reggie Draco, you play energy switch, but that pays the attack cost.
That's true. You're
Um,
right. So it doesn't pay it. Look, I think it's too. I think the tool, and I think the. I mean, I think the tool's a problem as well. I know like this top deck doesn't play it, but I think the tool's tough, and I do think Sada's Vitality is just a little. It makes it too easy to work. I think
yeah, I could see
for
nerfing
my
its
taste.
HP. Like its HP is really high for a basic EX. It's 240. Bloodmore's Linux is 260. Maybe that should be nerfed. I didn't say that, but 240 is quite high.
Yeah.
I could see it even at like 200. I mean, thematically, I'm sure there's a like it's supposed to be high, but still.
Right. As I'm looking here, like at the Ogre Ponds are at 210. I think if it was at 210 as well, that might be fair, right? Slightly on the low side, or rather, it's decidedly on the high side for a basic EX, and it's already got a great attack, so probably making it a little more vulnerable would be fair.
Yeah, I could also see Saw's Vitality accelerating from the hand, which would probably be worse. Um, or something like that. But yeah, anyway, I think Pokemon's like oops, I pulled off my headset. I think the Pokemon's like balance okay though. Certainly, a lot of the cards I feel like right now the meta feels pretty solid, honestly.
Yeah, no, I think there's pretty good diversity with what's going on now. It's still we're still in a pretty healthy meta all in all. I think we have been for a while, right? I think they this past year, I think all in all it's been pretty good for the game. You
Yeah, I've
know,
like Scarlet and Violet. Worlds is coming up. Yeah, so that'll be coming up in like a week or wait, no, 2 weeks. A week, I guess. And so I'm
mhm.
really excited to see what they're going to reveal at Worlds. They're going to reveal some new mechanic. Maybe I don't. Hopefully, it's not like the Stellar mechanic, which we've already seen and talked about a lot. So I think it's going to be the like. Oh, some people said it might be tag teams. That might not be ideal. I don't think tag teams are that bad, but I think they're not great, and I think a lot of people think they're pretty terrible. Tag teams were 3 prize basic Pokemon that were like really strong, like Reshizard we are talking about. But
Right.
like it was really high HP that at the time. It was higher than the stage two. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, yeah, there'll be some major announcement. I hope it's not tag teams. For a lot of people, see that as kind of being a major downturn in the TCG. So it wasn't. We were kind of post that time, or we started playing when they were around for the most part. So we don't have that same perspective. But and it's better if it's something new anyway, right? And
Yeah.
hopefully it's not a rename. Hopefully they don't reuse a past name. I
Yeah,
would.
it's
That's
gonna
my one
be
hope.
EX with new capitalization.
It'll
Um,
be a lowercase e, uppercase X now.
yeah, or it'll be like spelled out phonetically, so it's like EEEX or something like that. So, yeah, who knows? But I no, I think it's gonna be. It might be like the partner Pokemon or something, where it's like, uh, I can't think of
Yeah.
any. Like,
Well, like with a trainer in their Pokemon.
yeah, like the trainers. Oh, like Lance's Charizard V. There we go. That
Yeah.
card is that in standard? Uh,
I don't
it is
remember.
not.
I
No, it
don't.
is not.
I mean,
Um,
as far as actual gameplay was, it was never in standard, right?
no, I was.
It was never played. No one ever
Oh,
played it.
I
Is
guess
what
not.
I
I'm
mean
looking
there.
at it's like kind of it's 200 for 3 energies and has 220 HP. It's I mean it's the same as like Reshizard kind of, but no.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's all for today's video though, or podcast I should say. We are on YouTube though, youtube.com at 10 types or at uncommon fossil. You can check us out there. And you can comment down below your thoughts on the cards that you would nerf or you would buff. And also, we hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing to our channels, and also you can check us out on podcast platforms as well if that's how you'd rather listen to us. But we hope you enjoyed, and we're excited to see you in the next episode.
Take care.